High Church Protestants versus Latin Mass Catholics? Well, let me explain. So first off, I want to say I'm a Protestant, I'm a High Church Protestant, and I have nothing against my Roman Catholic siblings in Christ who wish to worship with the Latin Mass. And I have nothing against Latin Mass. It's a very historic form of Christian worship. It doesn't go back to the original form of worship of the church, but it is a historic form of worship of the church that is beautiful. However, the only difference that I see between Latin Mass Catholics and High Church Protestants is that Latin Mass Catholics tend to be way more forceful and saying, thou shalt worship this way, and this is the only way that thou shalt worship God. It's a very forceful, very rigid thing, like thou shalt worship God with the priest facing ad orientem towards the altar, and that the priest needs to be wearing these fancy vestments, and he needs to have all these various people helping him with the vestments and all this stuff. And again, that's beautiful and all, but the forceful nature of that is different than the High Church Protestants, because we as High Church Protestants, I suggest in my experience, in my personal way of doing things, I am not out there saying that we need to have a processional cross, we need to have torch candles, we need to have the choir and the Bible and the clergy in procession. The clergy, at least in the Presbyterian tradition, the clergy should wear, I'm not out there saying the clergy should wear fringe robes like the Church of Scotland with the Geneva tabs, the stole, a fancy pectoral cross with their academic hood. I'm not out there saying that that is the only way to do Presbyterian worship and Protestant worship in general. And again, I would suggest that the main difference between the way in which the Latin Mass Catholics and High Church Protestants advocate their points is Latin Mass Catholics are much more rigid, and High Church Protestants are a little bit more flexible, I suggest. So that's the difference between the way in which the Latin Mass Catholics and High Church Protestants advocate for their forms of worship. Peace and blessings, y'all.